Think knitting, and it might bring to mind those frumpy, itchy wool sweaters your grandma used to make when you were a kid. Well, not anymore. A new generation is taking up the needles where grandma left off. And these 20 and 30-year-olds are not afraid to show their crafty side in public. Midweek's Kristen Shane caught up with some of these knitters at an unlikely hangout last weekend.
18 women are gathered round small tables at the Carlton Tavern in Ottawa's Hintonburg neighbourhood. They sip beer and occasionally reach a hand to graze on greasy appetizers. But for the most part, their fingers are busy fiddling with the yarn in their laps. This isn't your grandma's knitting party. That's because knitting isn't just a hobby for grandmas anymore. Most of these women are in their 20s and 30s. Kate Dugas is 32.
Well, my Nana taught me how to knit probably when I was a little girl, like maybe 10. I still remember she bought me this green canvas bag, and it had this white silk screen of like a knitting needles and the yarn on the front and all of the old school gray knitting needles, the long pointy ones. And I knit a few things when I was little. And then I think it took probably until I was in my late 20s before I went back to it and thought, oh, this is something I want to do. And so I had to relearn everything that my Nana had taught me.
Like Dugas, many knitters here learned from their mothers or grandmothers as kids and returned to knitting as adults. Without grandma by their side, they're turning to the internet for help. Websites like Ravelry.com, dubbed Facebook for knitters, let users organize their stash of yarn, find patterns, and view what their friends are working on. Other knitters have created blogs with tips and video tutorials. Or there's the old-fashioned way to learn, by meeting face-to-face with other knitters. Nancy Moynihan is the president of the Ottawa Knitting Guild.
If I look back at the stats, I think that probably our numbers have doubled in 4 years. I think we were 100 and just over 100, and now we're over 200. I did notice that we had more younger knitters coming along, and also get requests every week from people asking me about where their sons or daughters can learn how to knit or, learn more about it.
Back at the bar, Dugas says she took up the needles again so she could make what she needs instead of having to buy it.
I think it's pretty practical to be able to know how to make socks and washcloths and sweaters and things to keep you warm.
Today, she's finishing a pair of oversized chocolate-colored socks. At the other end of the tables, Amanda Kerrigan is stitching a striped sock.
It's done in shades of pink. I have like a dark crimsony raspberry pink and then a couple of lighter shades, so it looks kind of like a raspberry swirl.
She says she thinks more people her age are knitting to make something they can hold in their hands and be proud of.
People are just wanting to do something that actually produces something. And a lot of things people do now, you're not producing anything. I grew up in the country, and I've been baking and gardening and doing all this stuff, but a lot of my generation didn't do all that stuff. And all of a sudden you're discovering, you can produce things, and you can design things, and you can make something.
Seated beside Kerrigan, Kim Carlson has another theory why young people have taken up knitting. At 48, she's one of the oldest knitters here.
You're having a lot more designers designing patterns that actually are nice and knittable and look good and are not, some of the old ones were oversized dowdy or frumpy. As a young woman in my 20s, when I first started learning to knit, I didn't want to wear most of what was there. I found myself having to hold back gut reactions when I did go to knitting groups back then, saying, oh, that's so nice, when I didn't really think so. It's not just a youthful thing, but I think more young people are interested in it now than used to be because it's not so frumpy or fuddy-duddy, really, to be honest.
So it seems, pretty patterns and funky yarns have roped young women into knitting. And in the process, these newbie knitters have ripped a giant hole in the stereotypical belief that only grannies knit. In Ottawa, I'm Kristen Shane.
For more information on knitting in Ottawa, visit ottawaknittingguild.ca.